Hello friends, this is Anton and you are on the Blackroom channel. In this video we will talk about the proper and correct placement of acoustic systems, or simply put, speakers in your home theater. It will be very interesting. You have been asking me to make this video for a long time, even though it seems like a clear topic for everyone. Nevertheless, let's talk about it in more detail today. Let's start by describing the initial data. The correct initial data, first of all, is the viewing position, because it affects how you will hear the multi-channel audio track of your favorite movie, which is no less important than how correctly you place the speakers. Ideally, you should sit somewhere in the middle, that is, along the axis of the room, roughly in the center of the room. It is preferable, of course, not to sit near the back wall, because standing waves will accumulate there and the bass will resonate. Well, simply put, it will most likely be quite far from the screen. In this case, you will be able to firstly distribute the surround channels around you as evenly as possible, and we will also talk about the ceiling channels in this position, allowing you to place them correctly so that they do not duplicate your floor speakers, but still provide you with spatial sound. The first speaker we will talk about today is the center channel. The most important speaker in your home theater or cinema. I have constantly talked about this, I am talking about it, and I will continue to talk about it. And that's because about 85% of all the information you receive comes from the center channel, as dialogue is heard there. And there are usually a lot of dialogues in movies. And all the informational content of a movie is usually concentrated in the center channel. Therefore, you cannot save on it, that's one. And secondly, it needs to be positioned as correctly as possible. And buying it is no worse than, for example, your left and right channels. The center channel should be positioned exactly in the center. Exactly in the center of your sound transparent screen. If you have a real home theater, a cinema room, and you have a projection screen hanging there, a sound transparent fabric, then you place it exactly in the middle of your screen. The height of placement is approximately the middle, or somewhere around 5/8 of the screen. It is best to orient yourself to the section that is somewhere between Twitter and mid-range. There will be the acoustic center of the speaker, and it should be positioned on one side somewhere not lower than the middle of the screen or around 5/8 of the screen, and on the other side it should preferably be angled towards the listener's ear. If your main audience row is significantly lower than the position on the wall where your screen is hanging. The sound should come from just above the middle, where the director usually places the head, the speaking person in the movie, and the sound coming from the center channel should be associated with this visual image. A common mistake made by installers here is placing the speakers behind the screen, behind the sound transparent screen, and for some reason they take and flip. The speaker that is exactly the same as the ones on the left and right edges of the screen for the center channel. They take it and flip it for no reason, even though it is designed to be positioned exactly the same as the left and right channels, but just in the middle of the screen. Now, regarding non-sound transparent screens, this will be the case in 95% of situations for those who have a TV or a regular non-sound transparent sun projection screen. In this case, the center channel is usually placed, and this is exactly how I recommend doing it, under the screen. But only if your screen is not on the floor or pressed from floor to ceiling. It shouldn't be done like that at all. The screen shouldn't go from floor to ceiling. You still need to leave some space and fit the center channel speaker there, but for simple cases in a home theater, there is usually a shelf and the TV hangs on the wall. In this case, accordingly, we place the center channel as close to the screen as possible. And one very important point is that you should not press the speaker against the wall when there is still some space on the shelf in front of the speaker, because the speaker will also play into that shelf. And unnecessary reflections will be created, various overlaps and phase cancellations of the signal, and you will simply have dips in the frequency response in this case. If you happen to have a speaker lying on the shelf under the TV, you should pull that speaker flush with your shelf. That is, here is the edge of the table and the speakers should be at the edge of this table. If such an option is not available, or you simply do not want to do this, at least take and place a soft absorbing material in the way. The sound in front of this center channel should extend to the end of your shelf, and it is very important to tilt this center channel vertically, especially if you have placed it quite low on the main listening and viewing rows. Because a very common mistake in home theaters is simply placing the center channel on the floor, thinking it will work fine. Many people end up with nothing good from this. Sometimes the center channel can be placed on top of the television or above the projection screen, but this is less effective. We perceive sound better when we have floor standing speakers, and the center channel positioned close to the level of these floor speakers. If you place it too high, it may be significantly detached from the levels of the left and right channels, which will create an uneven perception of the sound image. Therefore, the lower plane under the screen is preferable for placing the center channel. I also want to warn you not to place the center channel deep inside your cabinet. This is often done, and then it is covered with fabric, making it look nice, but your center channel will sound like it is coming from inside the cabinet, creating a horn-like effect. You understand, right? There will be distortions, and the frequency response will be completely incorrect, with a lot of unwanted resonances. You shouldn't do that either. The next two most important speakers are the left channel and the right channel. If we recall the most correct placement of the speakers behind a sound transparent screen, I advocate placing the speakers at the same level, of course, as the center channel, but on the sides of the screen, inside that screen, so that you have an acoustic image that moves within the boundaries of the picture. It will never go outside of this screen. If you place the speakers wider, beyond the boundaries of this sound transparent screen, there is a chance that the sound design will shift and some elements will start to extend beyond the screen. The next point that will be characteristic for a sound transparent screen or a television or a non-sound transparent projection screen is the positioning of your left and right channels depending on the design, how it is made, what kind of waveguide or horn it has, or if you simply have a dome tweeter without any waveguide on the front baffle of your speaker. You will either need to tilt this speaker towards the central point or not do that. Depending on the dispersion, this is a completely separate topic, but it is often useful to tilt the left and right channels towards the main viewing position. Or perhaps even tilt it a bit beyond this central spot so that your so-called sweet spot, or, well, the VIP zone, essentially, of comfortable, proper, quality listening expands rather than being limited to just one spot. But this is really a topic for a separate video. We will talk about it sometime. So if you are interested, be sure to leave plus signs in the comments to this video. Now let's talk about the placement of the left and right channels for all those whose screen is not sound transparent. If you have a projection screen and it is quite large, then there are no news at all. You hang the left and right channels as close as possible to this projection screen at the correct height, roughly at the middle of the screen, or 5/8. Well, or at the level of the tweeters if you have very poor dispersion and cannot tilt these speakers in any way. Now let's consider the case when you have a television. A television usually has a smaller diagonal, a smaller width, and acoustics are often placed very wide, about 60 degrees, so that the music plays well, because around 60 degrees an isosceles triangle is considered the ideal arrangement for listening to music. But when you do this, you get a very large disconnect from what is happening on the screen, and therefore if your priorities are cinema and the acoustics, especially if they are placed directly on the wall, meaning these are some mounted options, not just floor speakers that are at the height they actually have from the factory. The center speaker hangs or stands under the television. And in this case, try not to move your acoustics too far from the width of the screen. Well, roughly speaking, 1/2 meter would be very good, sufficient, and comfortable. That is, you have images. They won't fly off to the corners of the room and will still be connected and gathered around the image. But if your priority is stereo, meaning you sometimes use your media room, your home theater for listening to music, or more often use it for listening to music, then I can't advise you here. It is very rare to take and place the acoustics on some stands so that their tweeters, roughly speaking, align with the television, especially when it hangs quite high. There are no options here. That is, the speakers are positioned correctly, they play stereo for you, and sometimes participate in watching your movies. It is very important to have this frontal scene, especially the center channel, left and right. Try to set them up as correctly as possible to squeeze the maximum out of your room, and then you are already halfway to success. Now let's move on to the surround channels. First of all, the side surrounds. Very often in living rooms it turns out that we still sit and place the sofa against the back wall. Especially in this case, the surround channels start to suffer, particularly the rear ones, which I will discuss later. But the side surrounds are probably the most important surround channels, and generally the channels that create the immersion effect from the surrounding sound, because they were primarily created to properly convey the 5.1 format. Most of the content we consume from various online cinemas, especially Russian-speaking ones, is only in 5.1, Dolby Digital. The basic rule states that the surround channels should be located somewhere. From 90 degrees meaning parallel to the axis of the viewing position where we are sitting, from 90 to 120 degrees slightly back. When we talk about a 7.1 system, it is limited to 90 to 110 degrees. If your sofa is pushed against the wall, you have no choice. You just need to set it to 90 degrees and you won't go wrong. Personally, I have done this multiple times in my living rooms, in different apartments, and I had to do it because I set up the home theater across the room. I have always had a 5.1 or 5.2 system, which is more than enough for watching series and sometimes movies at home, especially since I always had Atmos at work and all that. And accordingly, these two surround channels play a crucial role in creating the immersive effect in the ambient format. Therefore, if you have pushed the sofa against the back wall, you shouldn't place them somewhere over here. There are 110, 120 degrees, you don't need to aim for that. You will achieve an excellent immersive effect even at 90 degrees. Just position the speakers correctly at 90 degrees. Moreover, you need to position it so that the direct sound reaches your ears. If you have several family members sitting to the left and right, there is a chance that their heads will block this direct sound. Therefore, you need to elevate the surround sound speakers. Raise them by about 10 to 15 degrees, especially when it comes to the Dolby system. If you suddenly decide to do something on the ceiling, there's no point in raising the surround too high. This practice originated from the need to elevate surround channels. It was always recommended because otherwise they could be too close to you. By raising them up, you effectively distance them. Thus, the influence of a speaker that is too close when you get a bit closer, for example, to your neighbor, is not as decisive. That is, it did not start to dominate, so to speak. You artificially positioned it higher. The advantage of such positioning is that you artificially achieve a somewhat elevated surround sound. That is, you don't just have something happening around you, but also at some elevation, meaning at a height. And this same situation occurs in public cinemas, where, as you know, all the surrounding channels usually hang quite high. But Dolby Atmos has arrived, and now it is not recommended to do this if you have a Dolby Atmos system. So once again, if there is no Dolby Atmos, you can raise your rear channels up to 60 centimeters relative to the front speakers. This also applies to the rear surround speakers, and the rear surround can even be raised a bit higher. We will discuss this now as well. As for Dolby Atmos, higher than a 15-degree elevation, it is better not to raise the rear surrounds, side surrounds, and rear speakers. Otherwise, roughly speaking, these speakers can be very close and may become very close to the ceiling channels, and then the effect of this three-dimensional sound will somewhat collapse. Well, if you ask me in the comments how I feel about bipoles, dipoles, or monopoles, that is what I choose for use in surrounds. I often receive this question in Instagram messages and in comments on YouTube. Well, I am a proponent of monopoles. It is the monopole speakers that radiate in one direction with one set of drivers. Ideally, they should all be the same around, used in content creation. And these bipolar speakers, which play in different directions simultaneously, sometimes even out of phase dipoles, were all invented specifically for home use to create the effect of spatial sound in a limited space when your speakers are too close to avoid localization, but this won't convey the true intentions of the sound engineer and content creator. Therefore, it's better to properly place and arrange monopole speakers than to play around and get a compromised sound from bipoles and dipoles. That's my personal opinion. If you've set up a 5.1 system correctly, congratulations, you've achieved 90% of overall success in the correct picture and sound field of your home theater system. Next comes the enhancement. The first setup that appeared with the advent of Blu-ray discs is the 7.1 system. 7.1, when 2 more channels were added. In native tracks, you can mostly get them in English. There are very few in Russian, so rear channels are usually artificially created by mixers from the 5.1 format. They add realism because they close the circle of rear surround sound. However, friends, I must disappoint you. Our ear is designed in such a way that it does not localize sounds coming directly from behind very well. Therefore, to feel the full effect from these speakers, we recommend moving them a bit closer than the standards dictate. For example, the standard states that it should be around 130-140 degrees. Try placing them at about 150-160. Well, actually, their elevation, as I mentioned, should be done similarly to how you do it for surround sound, definitely not lower. And if you have several rows in your home theater and there is a podium, then they need to be raised even higher so that the heads of the viewers sitting behind do not block these channels. Well, if you have created the correct 7.1 system, then I congratulate you. You have achieved 95% of everything that currently exists in terms of a great immersive effect from multi-channel, films. What follows is only up to us. We are closing this hemisphere where nothing used to happen, especially if we didn't elevate our surround sound. Now we have the immersive sound experience. We have talked about it multiple times and explained how to create the right Dolby Atmos for home. In general, we now have this third dimension. Now objects fly around like this. And to recreate this effect, you need to place about 4 channels somewhere on the ceiling. So proper placement is essentially dividing this entire hemisphere into equal sectors. But it is very important to take a look not just at the room layout and say that it would be correct to place the ceiling speakers here. No, you need to take and cut the room first lengthwise and then crosswise and look at the room layout. And already on these 2 layouts, if you take and draw a line from your head at the main viewing position first to the center channel, then a line to the rear channel of one of the back surrounds, you will have a certain sector left, which now need to be divided into 3 equal sectors. That is, you take a pencil and divide the remaining space into equal sections with approximately equal angles. And exactly where your line hits the ceiling, theoretically, you should place your Dolby Atmos speaker. Yes, we are currently talking about 4 channels which are necessary for minimal normal immersion and creating 3-dimensional sound in Dolby Atmos or DTS-X format. In Aura 3D, things are a bit more complicated. We will definitely talk about Aura 3D on our channel, so don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to not miss new videos. The standards of Dolby Atmos, by the way, are somewhat different, and they advise you to place the speakers in this projection on the same line where the left and right channels are located. Often, this will give you a rather uneven division of this hemisphere into sectors. We recommend, and many of our colleagues abroad also recommend, to rather follow the professional Dolby Atmos standard for professional cinemas. There, these speakers are placed closer together, and if you divide this half space into equal sectors, you will approximately hit that spot. Thus, we have obtained the correct placement of our ceiling channels, our 4 ceiling channels, and all other surround channels for the Dolby Atmos system. If you want to dive deeper into how to properly position multiple rows of speakers when you have more channels, I can offer you a link to guides from Trinov and Dolby on the proper placement and the science of correct positioning of surround channels and spatial sound. To obtain these documents, you just need to go to our Instagram account, subscribe to it, and send a direct message with the magic word guides. And we will send you a link to download them, friends. If you are building a house or renovating it and plan to set up a home theater and want to create a serious system, feel free to contact Blackroom. You can find all my personal contacts in the links in the description. Write or call me. You can even message me directly on WhatsApp or Telegram, and I will gladly respond and discuss your project. I hope it was very interesting and useful, and this is truly what you were waiting for, or even a little more, because I always try to invest in each video and explore the topic a bit broader than it may seem at first glance. Please like this video again if you found it really useful and interesting. Well, this was Anton, the founder of Blackroom. We will definitely see you in new videos. Goodbye, everyone.